Just let me know when we're recording. We're recording? All right, so welcome, guys, to the first episode of the Motley Crew podcast. This is Mike Tang here, Magic Mike, a.k.a. Who's the rest of the guests here?
Well, you got S Scoots over here. Follow me at Instagram, Dr. Goots, if you'd like. Tell your friends about me. This is good. We're also called The Tangent.
That's true. I'm sorry.
This is The Tangent.
This is The Tangent podcast.
The podcast, yes. And then next we got...
My name is RB.
And I'm Diamond Dave.
Diamond Dave. All right, so today we have the topic that RB had brought up a couple weeks ago, and he had explained that it was the chicken nugget paradox, but I am to be corrected once again. So, RB.
No government names.
No government names, that's right. Yes, please go and explain what the chicken nugget or chicken whatever paradox is.
So you and your significant other are sitting there having a date night, sharing a basket of chicken wings. So the question is, as you're sharing this basket of chicken wings and it comes down to the last chicken wing, and you really want to eat that chicken wing, and then you ask your significant other, babe, there's one chicken wing left. Do you want it? And then she says to you, no, you go ahead and have it. At that point, does she really want you to have it? Or is it a test to see if you're sensitive enough and considerate enough to actually give her and offer her that last chicken wing one more time?
So first, are we asking, being that we are the male partners, and our partner would be the female, right?
In our situation, yes, that would be the case.
Right. Well, I'm asking because, what if I'm out with the boys or something?
If you're out with the boys, you take that last chicken wing. You don't ask anything.
All right. Just want to clarify.
This is a date situation or a romantic night type of situation with your significant other, and this particular situation comes up. Are you going to be the sensitive one, or is it even a matter of sensitivity when she's already told you can have the last chicken wing? Do you turn around and then put it back in her court and say, no, babe, I would like you to have the last chicken wing? Or do you just take it and eat it? Or do you not even ask and we're sharing, it's understood, and you just take that last chicken wing without even asking altogether?
I don't know. This is a read in between the lines type of play. It's like, what is the big brain play to do? Yes. Do I do what she says and be like, well, it's what you said? Or do I do what I think she wants me to do, which is not take a chicken wing and let her have it?
Correct.
Yeah, so what's your answer, Mike? Being that you're, if you don't mind me sharing, you're the only one at this table that's not married.
What is my answer? I'm going to have to go with the literal, because if she's saying that, you know what, this chicken wing, you can have it, I'll be like, all right. And then I'll go ahead and take that chicken wing. And I'll deal with the ramifications later. Because I want, at least in my relationship, the communication to be primarily words. If you say one thing, I would hope that it means that one thing.
Yes, but we know oftentimes in relationships, what people say isn't exactly what it is that they mean. If you have something that you have to do on an anniversary weekend, let's say, and you say, hey, babe, I really need to do this on the anniversary weekend. She doesn't want to seem like the person that's holding you back from what it is that you want to do. But perhaps that question should have never come up in the first place. So you get back in town, okay, yeah, I'm going to go off whatever it is that you're going to do. You come back. It's the same sort of scenario, but on a grander scale. And that's what we're looking at here. Things on a grander scale, but you scale it back to a chicken wing, because these things come up all the time. So oftentimes in relationships, we get tested like this just to see what your spouse or what your significant other is going to do. How much do they really care about you?
You know what, Mike? I'm gonna jump in a little bit.
Please do. Please do.
I'm gonna tell you what I would do in that situation. I'm not reaching for that chicken wing.
Why not? Why not, Sam?
I don't care how good that chicken wing was. I don't care how hungry I am. I'm not reaching for the chicken wing.
Even if it's medium, it's cooked perfectly.
No.
She said, Stan, take it. I want you to have it.
No.
Yes.
You know, it's just a sacrifice that I'm willing to take.
It's a chicken wing at the bottom of the basket that's got
with all the
juices
flavors and the juices and the
soaked all the way to
seasoning.
the bottom.
Yeah, I get it. I got it.
There's
I
some
got
garlic
wing.
on it.
That's even more
chicken
reason why I wouldn't take it, because it's probably the best piece. And she's testing me. In my mind, in my experiences in life, that is a test.
Yo, but Stan, don't you think that would set a precedent? Because, in other words, you're saying this answer as in, I'm reading in between the lines. She's saying one thing, but this is what it actually means. Instead of jumping through all these mental gymnastics, why don't you just say what you actually want?
Yo, that is exactly what relationships are, my friend.
I know,
Mental gymnastics.
But I'm only a rookie, though. That's why I'm asking you guys.
Yeah, okay.
You know?
Okay.
It would make sense. Like, if I want this thing, I just say that I want that thing, not say I want this, but I actually mean this.
I mean, yes, logically that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's really little and few times of just pure logic in a relationship. You gotta tap into the emotional piece to it, right? So you sort of have to understand where your significant other is coming from emotionally, or not have to, but try to, because we all know you, and you're a logic man.
Yeah, that's me. That's what I do.
Logic brain.
Yeah, and I think Rob hit it right on the head. I think this is a microcosm of the relationship itself. So you don't take the wing and you lose, right? And you take the wing and you most certainly lose as well. So it's about these decisions that you have to make throughout the relationship. Two different decisions that potentially could lead to the same outcome.
Well,
but it's two different types of losses.
I was gonna say,
It's two
because if you say you
different
lose,
types of losses, right? That not eating that last piece is like your own physical, just, you know, you're just a little bit hungrier than you would like. You just wanted the last piece. You had 8 pieces already.
So let me rephrase that. Is this an allegory to, hey, I'm going to go out tonight with the guys. If you go, right? Yeah, go ahead. That sounds great. If you go, where do you end up?
So, I mean,
Stan's like, yeah, I don't know what.
you know, that's a challenging question, because it all depends on okay, go have fun. It depends on how that is displayed. Depends on the emotion behind that gesture. Depends where you are in the time of your relationship. Yeah, it's a complicated scenario. I think even more complicated than the chicken wing. You know, going out with the boys, going out with the fellas, that's complicated on many different levels.
And I think that this essentially, the genius of this paradox that RB has prosed here is that it is the foundational question, or the foundation of every fabric, every piece of fabric in your relationship. It's all the chicken tender or chicken wing paradox over and over, just varying degrees of it. Is that correct?
Varying degrees for sure. I would definitely say that. It's just like what you said, going out with the boys. You could take a look at that too. So I think with your particular question and how you spun the scenario, Dave, you look at it and you say, I want to go out with my friends this weekend. But what have you done in that relationship to have fun with your significant other leading up to that question? If you guys spent the last 3 weekends at home, Netflix and chill, oh, let's just hang out here and then do all the things that you normally do, but then all of a sudden you want to go out and have fun without her, that's not going to be a good situation. She's likely to shut that down at that point. Or at the same time, bringing it back to the chicken nugget scenario, perhaps you shouldn't even have asked that question about the last chicken wing, You should just let it sit there, because you know that there weren't enough chicken wings in that basket to begin with, and both of you guys are still hungry. So in that particular situation, you don't even ask the chicken wing question. You just let it sit there and then just assume that she's going to eat it. and then at the end of the night when the chicken wing is cold and all that kind of stuff and she's gone to bed, then maybe you want to put that last chicken wing in the microwave and then eat it after that.
Wow.
Something like that.
That's some
but it's very on level. So it all depends on what leads up to that particular question. Can I go out with my boys? If she's feeling fully satisfied and she's feeling fully trusting in you and she's feeling like this relationship is very satisfying to me and we've done so much over the past couple of months or weeks or whatever it is, and he just wants one night out with his boys, then yeah, she'll be more receptive to it. But if you haven't fed into the relationship up until that point, you might not get the response that you're looking for.
So RB, what would you say, or what's a good way to gauge if you're in the green or in the red? It's kind of how I'm looking at it. Like, it's like a gauge of like, all right, I'm at, a little bit of green right now. If I ask this question, there's a high probability that, you know what? She's gonna let me go out with the boys, and it'll be all right. Mm-hmm. And how will I know if I'm in the red or I'm in the middle? I don't even know where I would be. And you know what? I ask it, and the fact that I even asked this question is already a loss, as you had just pointed out earlier.
Could be. Could be.
How would I know? Oh, sagely one, please.
I think every relationship is different, and you've got to look at how your particular loved one receives love. Because if you say, like, if you buy her flowers, a person told me one time that her husband, every single week, every Saturday, he would come home with a single stem rose for her every single Saturday. For all those years, but she's not really a single stem rose person. He thought he was doing something really good and really nice for all those years of marriage or whatever it was, but she could care less about it. So you have to meet your significant other where they are, how it is that they actually receive that love. Perhaps it would have been better, instead of the single stem rose, if he would have just taken her out to a restaurant or something like that on a weekly basis. Quality time as opposed to the gift giving. Things like that. So it all depends on what it is that how she receives, or he or she receives their love, and what you've done leading up to that point, and do they actually feel appreciated within the relationship to let you go out and individually do what you want to do because her needs have then been met. So it's all individual.
Yeah, but Rob, there's no way for me to know how somebody will respond to that particular stimulus. One day, if you get somebody, let's say you get the person's really into shoes or something, and you get them a new pair of shoes every single day. If I get them shoes every single day, the effect of getting new shoes every day is just not as effective. Even if I bring that up, it's like, oh, I want to go out with the boys who got shoes every single day. And at that point, am I trying to manipulate the situation, saying like, you know what, I'm just giving you A, shoes, for B, so I can go out type of thing.
Right.
What do you mean, right?
Right.
What?
No,
What?
I understand your scenario. But if your significant other is the one that says, or you know that she appreciates shoes on a regular basis, and that's what you get her all the time, you're now being sensitive towards her feelings and what it is that she wants. So if you're sensitive towards her feelings and what it is that she wants, all in fair play, she should be able to say, okay, well, let me make this sacrifice and sit home tonight and let him go out with his boys, because I now have a closet full of shoes that my man has bought for me, and I could post these on Instagram and social media, and my man is this, my man is that, whatever it is that she's into, whatever it is that she likes, you've now met those needs. Now, if you've met those needs and then she still says no, and then she's still acting up and saying that you can't go and you never spend time with me, or you never buy, I mean, you have to take every excuse out of the book. You never buy me shoes or whatever. No, I buy you shoes all the time. Then that whole rational argument can be made, because then you'll have a leg to stand on. But if you don't do anything leading up to it, you have no legs to stand on, and she's going to win every time.
There's two parts to that. I know Stan had brought up one. He said you should be able to. That's the first part. And second part you said to me is, at least you'll have a rational standpoint to stand on. I've heard on many occasions that if I'm out here talking about rational outcomes, it's just not a good way to go.
Right. You don't want to mention the word rational standpoints, of course not, because then you're going to assume that your significant other is being irrational. And that just puts them into a defensive mode. They're not being irrational. This is the way that they see it, right? So you've got to be able to say, this is the way that they see it, and know how it is that they see it, and then turn around and then meet those needs, and then go ahead and ask your question, can I go out with my boys, or last chicken wing, and all these types of things.
I just want to say thank you, Rob, but I don't understand. I think I understand, but I'm not really sure if I understand. Maybe Reverend, the holistic Reverend over here can
Well,
explain it.
I
What do you think?
have a question to Rob, though, in the sense of, should you ask permission to go out with the boys, right? Because oftentimes in the clinic we sort of have this dialogue about one of the parts of a successful relationship that many people have said is sort of a bit of autonomy within the relationship, right? So should it be something like, she will let you go if I do X, Y, and Z, right? And Mike said a key word a little bit earlier. It sort of feels like a manipulation. Like, I have to do 1, 2, 3 in order for me to go out with my boys, right? As opposed to just being like, hey, I want to go hang out with my boys, or I want to go hang out with my boys. And, we spent the last 3 weekends together. And I just want to have this one weekend to myself or with my boys. Is that not a fair question to ask of your significant other?
Now, do you mean the actual literal asking of the question, or is it just, do you go to her and just say, hey, I'm going out with my boys this weekend? Because you said a little bit of autonomy within the relationship, because once you have to ask permission for something, doesn't that imply that you're automatically putting your autonomy with somebody else to give you permission to do this?
Correct. And that's
Right.
what you said earlier, that she would let you go with your friends.
Right.
So that's
Right.
basically the question I have for you. Like, hey, if you wanted to go out with your friends, I don't necessarily know. Do I have to do 1, 2, 3 to manipulate, as Mike used earlier, my lady into letting me go, as opposed to still doing what you said, making sure that she's emotionally content with what I'm doing, but also just being like, hey, I have this date. Can I go? Or I just want to make sure that I'm good to go.
Yeah, and I think that's more the way that you should word it, because I don't think you should ever have to ask permission for something. It's just
Right.
more about an open communication and
Right.
open dialogue.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got this stuff coming up. Am I good to go? Do we have anything else going on? I'd like to do this with me and my boys. So I think it's more of that, as opposed to, can I go tape this podcast with my 3 friends this weekend? Yes or no? That type of thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that is the genius of the chicken wing paradox right there, is that you can take every possible step, prepare. You can, as you guys have discussed, you can talk about it, you can lay it out logically, and she can say, hey, I'd go out, have fun, it would be great, and you can make the decision to go, and it can go well. Conversely, you could not go, right? And then you lose, in the sense that you lose your autonomy, as you guys have discussed. So the question is how does this paradox, and how does your theory account for irrationality?
Well, I think, if it's irrational behavior, that's one thing. If the person is just because you have controlling people in this world, right? They just don't want you to do anything without them. And that more falls on them. That more falls as a trust issue more than anything else. They don't feel comfortable within themselves to allow you to be your own person. So that's more of an insecurity. So that's one scenario that comes up. The second scenario is, like I mentioned before, you think you're doing all the right things to satisfy that person's needs, but you're actually not doing it. You think by buying that single stem rose every single week, you're doing your thing, but you're actually not doing that. And she's not really, or he or she's not really communicated that with you to say, this is really not what I like. And she just smiles and says, oh, thank you, RB. Thank you for this rose, or whatever it is. But then but psychologically, she's like, this really doesn't do anything for me. So then when you think you've built up all this credit in your bank, and then you go to cash in, you have no money there. That's it. There's nothing there to borrow.
So the question, sorry to interrupt, but I guess Mike's question initially was, how do you continue to check in? How do you make sure that what you're doing, your significant other is receiving in a sort of a positive light where you are in the green, right? Do you have any methods, being that you're the sage of all sages?
See, and I think you hit the nail on the head, right? How do you continue to check in? That's exactly what you do. You check in on a periodic basis. You go to your significant other and you just say something as simple as, hey, you doing okay? Are we doing okay? And then if he or she says, yeah, and you make sure that this is something that you regularly do within the relationship, so she knows that this is her time to actually say, no, I'm not doing okay because of X, Y, and Z. Oh, yes, I'm doing okay, and then you'll feel that fervor. So then what you're really doing is eliminating all the excuses that could potentially come up when it is time for you to take your autonomy. I've asked you if you're okay. I check in on the relationship periodically. I make sure that your needs are being met based on what it is that you're feeling and what it is that you need from me. And now I'm asking to cash in a little bit by just going out with my boys or whatever it is that I want to do. Now, in a situation like that, if you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing and that communication is fully out there on the table, and then she still says no, then you have to look at it in a situation, well, am I now being taken advantage of? What deficits does this person have? What insecurities do they have as to why I'm doing all of this stuff and then still I'm not gaining or getting anything out of this relationship? So that's when you have to dig it a little deeper within that person and then see what's going on there from a deeper level, as opposed to just, I'm doing my part, but I'm not getting anything in return. So you should be able to get something in return if you check all the boxes.
So even when you're saying that and you say, okay, you should check in every once in a while, make it a regular thing in your relationship type of thing. I feel, I don't know with significant data, I'm just feeling this right now, speculating, right? If I am constantly checking in, the fact that I am checking in all the time is going to raise potential insecurities. As in, why are you checking in all the time? Why do you gotta know? Why are you so unsure of where we're at? Can you not even tell where we're at? Why are you so uncalibrated?
A paradox within a paradox.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would agree.
And you would say that, right? If I'm constantly checking in, is that, hey Rob, we good today? Are we good? Are we good at Coral Springs right now? We good? And you'd be like, yo, why do you keep asking me if we're good? Yeah, I said we're good. And then the next day, we good, Rob? And you're like, oh, yeah, we're still good. So even with that advice that you just said, if I go and implement it, I still feel that it would give me problems. So how do I go and remedy that, Rob?
Well, first thing, you don't want to ask every day. That's way too much. That's a little much. I would say once every couple of weeks, couple of times a month, something like that. That's when you want to check in. And then eventually, you wouldn't even have to do that because all of the problems would then be ironed out. And it all depends on how deep this problem runs, right? So if your problems run really deep, you might want to check in on a weekly basis just to make sure everybody's needs are being met. And she has to be receptive to you. You have to be receptive to her. Everybody has to be honest and then say what it is that's going on. And then she'll tell you the needs that she has unmet, and then you have to be honest with yourself. Can you actually meet those needs without compromising too much of who you are, and vice versa? So that's when the whole relationship dynamics, is it really going to work? Is it not really going to work? All that kind of stuff goes on. But I mean, it's just about the communication of it and then knowing where you stand on a regular basis. Just like that single stem rose guy. He should have said eventually, do you even like single stem roses? And he would have probably found out, well, no, I really don't. Well, he needs to change up his style a little bit.
Well, also to counter, Rob, I think it's also the responsibility of the partner to be like, hey, thank you for the gesture, but I don't really like single stem roses that much.
But some people won't do that. Some people, yeah.
Right. So I'm just saying that, it seems like it's a one-sided street, and oftentimes we always hear happy wife, happy life. So
Right.
we know that the responsibility is on to us. But at the same time, you're speaking about communication and open dialogue. I think in that scenario, the wife would have done well by herself to say, hey, I appreciate what you're doing, but I don't like single stem roses. Here's maybe a couple of things that I do like or that I do want. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not a passive sport. You can't be on the sideline in your relationship. in my opinion. Like, I definitely agree with a lot of things you're saying. And one thing I would offer is to check in doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, are we good? You know, like most individuals that we speak to in the clinic, they talk about checking in on a daily basis and like, hey, how you doing today? How was your day? And you know, sometimes that kind of opens up the avenue for discussion. So it doesn't necessarily mean like, yo, we good today? No. It's checking it in many different ways, and and as you start to, you know, learn about the individual and live with the person, you'll understand their moods, their behaviors. You know, communication is not just verbal. There's many sort of sectors of communication. So you'll pick up on the smaller things. That's what I would add as well.
I just want to say that this is under the assumption that both parties are rational. Just want to point that out, because all these different interventions that you guys are talking about, this is under the assumption that everybody will respond within a certain amount of responses that are rational.
I'm going to take a stab at this. I see everyone extremely hesitant to jump in following that comment.
Well, yeah, it's a very inflammatory comment.
Well, I wouldn't say inflammatory, but no, I think that you hit it on the head. I think that emotion and irrationality can make a lot of these very seemingly simple tasks difficult. It can make communication difficult. It can make you less likely to communicate. They can make you assume and second guess. And they can also bring you into a situation almost emotionally charged, or with expectations of the outcome being one way or the other. And I think over time, a lot of these issues can create walls and barriers to perhaps, as Rob has mentioned, gaining some traction toward getting some more autonomy, if that's what you choose, or maybe it's something different. But I think that's how rationality plays into it, Mike.
I don't know what that means. You're like real deep in it. I was like, I don't understand. I'm gonna need you to give me like an example or something, because I'm over here like, yo, what?
So let's overly emotional responses, right, can create irrationality, right? If you're overly scared of a situation, you're going to respond irrationally, right? If I'm scared of dogs, right, and I open the door to go into your home and I see a small dog and I scream and slam the door and run out, that's an irrational response. Your dog is sitting there happily, right? So the same thing goes with any sort of interaction with another individual, right? If I'm overly emotional and I make an assumption based on something you said, it can create very, very difficult times communicating with that individual going forward. Would you agree?
Yes.
And I think Stan has touched on this multiple times, actually.
But okay, even with that example, you said that it's an irrational response, that if I'm scared of dogs and your dog is just hanging out there living it up and I scream, you would consider that to be irrational. However, for me, I see a dog right now which scares me. Is it really irrational for me to scream?
Well, if you contextualize the situation, right, and you have one individual that is acting purely on logic and the other individual that's emotional, right, that's never going to work. So Rob touched on this earlier. Excuse me, RB touched on this earlier.
It's not going to work, bro. We just call you Rob.
Pseudonym RB.
Kumbaya, RB. Kumbaya, RB.
Touched on this earlier about communication styles, and if you are coming in logically and someone else is coming in emotionally, you're going to struggle to communicate regardless of your response, whether you think it's normal or the other individual thinks it's normal. So I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's definitely going to create difficulty.
But this touched upon something that Stan was talking about the other day. and I asked him a question about child rearing practices. And this is the segment I want to get into, because I remember I asked him to premise I don't have any kids. I am only speculating based off what these fine gentlemen are telling me here. So I said, sometimes to communicate to somebody, you almost have to match their emotional state so that it is more likely that an individual will listen to what you're saying, right? If somebody's very angry, it's like you might have to amp up your energy a little bit so that they can relate to you, saying like, you know what, you're on my level right now. I'll listen to what you say. But what Stan had said the other day was saying, at least for in child rearing, if some kid is very angry and you match them with that level of intensity, it's adding fire to more fire. And so you actually had to come in with ice to cool down the situation. Now, I bring that back to what you were just saying, like, oh, is it one is an emotional response and one's a logical response? And we go ahead and attack it from, well, it's just not going to work, you said, right? In his case, he said that it does work. If anything, you match it either both logical or both emotional, it works even worse. So how do you respond to that, Dave?
I don't necessarily think that it's not going to work. I think it's going to create difficulty. Any time you have two divergent styles of communication, two divergent viewpoints, takes an ability to step back and remain unbiased, to be able to really stay within the situation, right, and to not lose control. And again, that's where the irrationality comes in. If you become overly emotional, overly irrational, you're unable to do that. You lose sight of the situation, and you may act in ways or speak in ways that are counterproductive or that may not help you move forward.
So how would we go ahead and define rational? Because rational is really just a matter of perspective.
It is definitely a matter of
Right?
perspective, like you said earlier. Like you said earlier, the individual who sees the dog and who's screaming, and who, from the outside looking in, is being irrational, to them that's a rational response. So if you're within an argument with an individual that's behaving irrationally, they believe that they are not, and that this response is warranted.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It is very important to learn about the communicative styles, like Rob said, or RB, excuse me. It's going to take a little bit of practice. Kumbaya, RB.
Yeah, this is episode 1. I'm sorry.
But anyway, it takes some time and effort, and if you can bring some ice, and also different coping mechanisms, right? So depending on what you're sort of discussing, if it's getting hot and you have the presence of mind to maybe come back to it later, right? Allowing yourself to kind of breathe a little bit, or kind of allowing the sizzle to come down a bit, maybe the other individual can decrease the amount of emotion tied to it. So it just all depends. It really all depends. But learning, like RB said, learning the communicative style is really, really important. And Mike, you're a very logical person. You put a lot of value to thinking logically, and that's just not going to work. It's just not. I'm sorry.
Thanks, bro. Thank you.
So I would say to you, as a single man, meaning like you're not married at this point in time, you're gonna have to learn how to cope. Yeah, it's just, how do you cope with those certain situations where you're not getting the communicative needs and wants that you desire from your partner? How are you going to cope in that situation? And again, it's like RB said, every situation is different.
So, based on all this different stuff we said right now, what is the actual end conclusion, Sagely one? Because I'm over here
It's-
speculating, like, okay, if one is incorrect and both options are incorrect, you guys stated earlier, you know what? Just asking the question in itself is incorrect. But if you don't ask, you don't know.
But do you really? Like, do you really?
What?
Like, honestly.
What?
But that brings. Sorry to interrupt, but that brings me back to my first point. When the question was asked, I don't even want it at this point. I don't want it. I just do not want that chicken wing. Babe, you can have it. You know, like I'd rather it go in the trash.
But what if you do want it? That's the idea.
Yeah, hey, listen.
It's something that can't be had. You
Listen,
should just think it doesn't
You
exist.
know, then Mike, you know what? I'm gonna encourage you to meditate a little bit. Maybe control your inner wants, because that chicken wing is just not that important, man.
So I should just see that it's actually not there.
It's just
There's
not
no
there.
spoon type
Yeah,
of thing.
absolutely.
Matrix style. There's no spoon.
You just tell yourself that chicken wing no longer exists, but it's the best one, and you know that, and it's the one that you want,
But it doesn't exist.
but it doesn't exist.
So it's a unicorn then.
I don't know if it's a unicorn. It just doesn't exist.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I would go about the chicken wing.
It's nicely put.
Well, I would sagely one. RB.
I would agree with what Stan said. I in my experience, I just would not go there. I would just look at that last chicken wing at the bottom of the basket, and I would just leave it there until it's very clear that she doesn't want it. Very clear.
But as Dave had said before, this is an allegory for the entire relationship to begin with.
Right.
You cannot just say like, "Hey, I'm going to go out," and now he's like, "You know what? I just don't want to go out anymore."
Right.
Right?
It is definitely an analogy.
Right.
So you have to really gauge it. You really have to pick your battles if you think there's going to be a battle for you to go out. If you haven't put in enough in order to even pay attention to things outside of the relationship because you haven't put enough into the relationship, then no, you don't even ask that question. You take that weekend or that night or that day that you're going to go out with your friends, and then you drive it right back into the relationship to make your relationship stronger before you even tackle that.
So it's an investment then
Absolutely.
to get the tendies later.
Exactly.
But this is an investment that we don't know will actually pay off. You might have just dumped it in. It's like, oh, and it's gone.
And it's gone.
And it's gone.
And I wanted to just kind of tap onto what Dave said, or just ask a question. I've always thought about this over my lifetime. Can emotion and intellect exist in the same place? And then you come to a good, solid conclusion. You have one person, like you, Tank, speaking from a very intellectual, rational standpoint, and then you have another person that's speaking from a very emotional standpoint. I mean, I think at some point, both of them have their value. Both of them should come to the table, but somewhere it should be some sort of spectrum, as opposed to somebody being so far extreme emotional, so far extreme analytical and rational and intellectual. Somewhere in the middle, those two have got to meet. And I think that's if you can meet together there with your partner, I think that's where the best decisions are made for the relationship. Somewhere between emotion and intellect.
I would agree wholeheartedly. I think that history shows us that some of the most charismatic individuals, some of the greatest thinkers, had that perfect combination, right? Mm-hmm. The perfect combination of intellect or analytical abilities and emotion. I mean, that's ideal.
And when Dave says perfect, I don't know if there's
The journey.
Yeah.
Those furthest along on the journey.
No,
There we
because
go.
every situation, like Rob said, is going to require a spectrum. So, the perfect is going to be a balance between the two, right? It may be, one discussion or disagreement requires a little bit more emotion, right, from you, and maybe more logic from your partner.
Right? All these statements, I definitely agree with it. But I just want to say, like, hell no. Robot life for life, my friend.
But why?
Because robot life is not the emotional life. That's why. But I agree. I agree with all the statements. But the inner feelings, just like, I agree, yet I also don't agree. But I still agree.
So I don't necessarily think that the feelings have to diminish. The emotion doesn't have to diminish the intellectual capacity or the logic. It can actually enhance it. So if you deliver with enthusiasm, right, or if you deliver with confidence, I think it can actually inspire people to believe in you more, to read into your logic more. Someone who wouldn't necessarily receive logic well, if you maybe blended it with some enthusiasm and some emotion, maybe you could get a new audience or get someone to listen to you that wouldn't normally listen to you and would blow you off and be like, nah, that guy's just a robot, right?
But also maybe not.
But to Dave's point, I was going to say this a little earlier. There are certain emotions that you do want to sort of match. You remember not too long ago we had that discussion about empathy or excitement, right? If someone comes to you and they're excited about something that they did, and you just come back with pretty flat affect, and they're gonna be like, all right, well, forget this guy, right? But those emotions, yeah, I would say that you do want to match it, like, oh yeah, great job, as opposed to just good job, right? However, in my experience, when you match like anger or frustration, it just adds, it builds to it, right? And it doesn't allow for communication. So maybe taking a step back or trying to cool it down a bit, so you can have a better understanding. You will never understand, Mike. But that's not the goal, right?
What?
The goal is to have a better understanding.
You won't.
Right?
Because it's always changing. No, or is it not changing? Or I just can't understand. It's not something that can be understood.
Whatever it is, you just want to have a better understanding. You remember, you want to be less wrong than more right.
That's right.
That's right.
Very smart.
Ooh, deep.
Wow. Well, that's a good point. Did we hit all the? Did we flush this one out? The whole topic?
I think so.
I don't know, unless RB.
Yeah, unless RB got something to add to it.
Closing words from the founder himself.
The closing words are just, do not eat that last chicken wing. Just don't do it. Under any circumstances. Stay away.
Okay. All right. So the sage himself has spoken. I will readily accept this knowledge, and I don't know if I can implement it because it kind of doesn't make sense to me, but it does. I've taken into account what Dave was saying, I think, and then also with Stan. As usual, it's a matter of perspective.
Always, man. It's a matter of perspective.
So this will conclude our first episode of The Tangent with the Motley crew here. Reminder, my name is Mike, and we have Dr. Goots over here. RB?
RB.
Kumbaya.
RB.
And we got Dave, Diamond Dave.
Diamond Dave.
For the first episode.
That's right.
All right.